Hello, welcome to the Writing Gals. Tonight we're talking about book boyfriends. This is something that I personally have been trying to talk my friends into doing for a little while because I'm super obsessed with male love interests. But before we get into all the fun stuff, let's find out what everybody's doing. I'll start with Judy because why not?
Okay, awesome. So I am still trying to finish the book that I was trying to finish last week that was due to my editor last Tuesday. So it's almost done, but this book is long. So right now it's at I think I'm like one word away from 78,000 words. So, but I'm writing the last scene before the epilogue. So I will finish it tonight. That's my goal. So yeah, that's just what I've been doing. And then also working on that game app a little bit too, which is why my writing has been slowed down. So I'll be excited to get the book done and I can focus on that and then the next book. So that's what I've been doing.
Lots of projects. Okay, Amy, let's hear it from you.
Well, I just finished my Georgia Patriots book, and it is at the editor to be released on Wednesday. I'm excited about this book because even though they're not characters that are in my series, the side character is the next in my brother's series. So it was kind of fun getting to know him in a different book and then hopefully leading them all to the second book in my brother's series, which I am about 10,000 words into already. And it's called Her Best Friend. And so it's really fun. I really like best friends tropes because there's all that like history has already been taken care of and they're not angsty like second chance romances are. They're always super angsty. So this one's just really fun. And I also have a contract with the same gaming company that Judy does. So my book will be put, rule number 1 will be put into a game. But we are currently working through the script right now and trying to figure out how best to get that out. So I probably won't be put out as fast as Judy, but I'm okay with that. So lots of stuff going on too.
Victorine?
So exciting about the game. I can't wait to play you guys' games. That's so awesome. I released a book this week. Yay! So I have a book birthday. It is Don't Bet on Love. It's my young adult book, and I'm super excited about it. And I just started another young adult book that I'm writing for our Sweetwater series, and that should come out July. So super happy about that as well.
Yay for book launches. I launched a book this week too, To Love a Lord, my regency that I've been talking about since we started this podcast. So finally got something done. Yay me. So that's fun and difficult, starting over in a new genre for the most part. But I am really proud of myself for finishing it. And I am jumping right into 3 different stories at one time. So I'm working on my Saved by a Billionaire, which I hope to get out the beginning of April. And then I'm going to finish my Sweetwater book, Flirting with the Bad Boy, that's coming out the end of April. And I am also writing a chapter a week in my next Regency House Party story, which is called The Vexatious Widow. And that one is coming out June 11th. So I have a lot of deadlines and a lot of books to write, but it's a lot of fun to be doing what we're all doing. Like, we call ourselves writers, so it's fun to be doing the writing part. Okay, let's jump right into this because there's a lot we want to get to, and we're going to try and keep it a little bit short tonight. We are going to talk about book boyfriends. So one of the things that's always interesting is what is it about a male main character, especially a love interest, that makes people fall in love with them. And I'm not just talking about the women in their story, but all of the readers that just think they're awesome.
Well, I think it's their flaws and then their imperfections and also like the fact that I don't know, like they're kind of the contrast on the girl. I don't know. There's some part of them that you're so like incomplete without her, but then when she's around, you are complete. That sort of thing. I think that always endures them or endures me to a guy in any type of story.
I agree with that. I also love their vulnerabilities coming out because men usually have this kind of non-emotional facade they have on, and so I like my main male characters to show some vulnerabilities at some point throughout the book. I also love how they want to protect the woman in their life, so that's makes my heart patter too.
Yeah, I love those things too. I also, I'm going to be shallow. I like them to look good too. I like the my female, main character to be like super attracted to him, and I like them to have a nice voice and just all that good stuff. But I definitely like the things that Amy and Victorine said too. I'm not only shallow about that.
It's okay. I'm totally with you. So,
yeah.
I like them to look good too. If you're watching a movie, I watched the most recent Jane Eyre, and the girl on there so homely looking, and I was like, this is terrible. And they were like, well, that's really how the story goes. I'm like, not in Hollywood. You got to make her a little bit attractive, or if not, I don't want to watch this. Is that terrible?
Amy gets the shallow award for the night. No, just joking.
Oh, I'm funny with her though.
Yeah, everybody was thinking it. That's the thing. Everyone's just like, I just can't like make her a little prettier. Go watch like a clip of it and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
I've actually seen it, and I think it's interesting how a more homely actress can grow on you through a film. But it also makes readers really angry when they know that a character is supposed to be homely and then they're pretty in the film. Because the thing about Jane Eyre is that the whole plot revolves around the fact that she doesn't think she's pretty and she doesn't think she's good enough for him in a lot of ways. And so to have an actress play her that was really pretty would have kind of undermined the plot of the movie. So I totally get your point. But purists are going to be like,
But you can think you're not that good looking and still be good looking. People do that all the time.
Yeah. Huh? Well, like, okay, so on the like Pride and Prejudice, the BBC version, I think her sister was way uglier than Elizabeth was as an actress, and you were like, oh, what? No, she's supposed to be the prettier one. That didn't make sense to me. Somebody skipped that, the casting for the people there. There was something going on.
Yeah, casting is important. I would agree with you on that one. That's one of the things that's always bugged me about that older version of P&P.
Well, if you think about it too, like we liked watching the Hunger Games, right? But it was something about the fact that Peeta and Gale, you almost wanted them to be flipped, because when you have an image in your head of the hero, it's not Peeta.
I don't
and
know.
as much as I loved him and he was really sweet, I mean, you're up against like Liam Hemsworth. Like, come on, people. Let's get in our minds here. And I know he was supposed to be whatever, and I don't know.
I will forever and ever be a team Edward for the book and a team Jacob for the movie for that exact reason. Because they did not cast the epitome of male beauty for Edward Cullen. So
he did get better as the movies went on, though. So
but he was like Taylor Lautner, like seriously.
Always like a pale, almost concave, wimpy chest, and
you guys get to learn the shallowness of the writing gals.
Yeah, here we go. Okay, so I'm going to talk about my favorite part of writing, or what I think makes them good. I like them to be decisive and strong, while at the same time, like, seeing their vulnerabilities. But I also like the characteristics of a man who is strong and decisive, and someone who has a sense of humor. That one always is attractive to me. Like, they can be a punk and kind of sarcastic, but if they're funny, I'll buy it. You know what I mean? So we'll just kind of I'm sure that we could list a lot more things that we really like about them or what we think makes them good. So Amy, you talked about flaws a little bit. How do you balance giving them flaws and still making them likable? Because I've seen a lot of debates about that. Comes up a lot. And recently, I was involved in a discussion with some of my other critique partners about people think they want flaws, but if you give them flaws that trigger their bad life experiences, then it also becomes a real negative. So what are your guys' thoughts on flaws versus likability?
Well, I think that there are some aspects of it, of flaws that you don't want to touch. Obviously, things like you just said that trigger people. I don't go that way. Like people, I don't try to give my male characters like grievous addictions, because I think that would be kind of hard to solve a problem and a romance at the same time. So like in my YAs, I normally write them female perspective only, and so you don't get any of the male's perspective. And so you want to continue to have your males have flaws, because both of them are going to have to go through the character arc, even though you're not actually seeing the male's point of view. So I always try to show to the reader, like, where the female character gets to see the male character, or the male character says something to her or hints something to her or does something for her that shows that he's a good guy, even though maybe he's teasing her, or he's, doing these things that you would be like, oh yeah, that would be really annoying. But then, like, he opens the door for her, or he's really nice to her in some way. So it's kind of showing that sweet and sour side of the main male character that I think is really important. You kind of have to, wax and wane, because you can't make him too sweet, because now the tension's gone. So you kind of have to give a little, and then, 2 steps forward, 1 step back sort of situation. But always where, the female main character is kind of thinking, did I really see that? Or am I just not sure if I did? And, oh, but he did it again, or he's just being nice to me, or, those kinds of things. You have to go back and forth. So you have to give them flaws, but then you have to also give them reasons to be likable. And I think finding the balance between those two is kind of an instinct thing. And then also getting beta readers, because beta readers are going to be like, oh my gosh, no, I hate your main character. Your main male character is terrible. You need to, change it. And then obviously, if they feel that way, then you need to change it, because they're going to be the one reading it from start to finish, whereas you're kind of more invested. So if you feel like you might be writing about a guy who might be a little more complicated, I would definitely get beta readers on it.
Yeah, I agree. I also really appreciated Brandon Sanderson's class on sympathetic characters. And if you go to YouTube and just Google on the top, search for Brandon Sanderson sympathetic characters, you'll find his lecture on that. And he gives great tips on what you can do to make your character sympathetic. So if you have a main male character that has to start out kind of in a jerk, position, and then his character arc is to lose that over time, you can do certain things to make him a more likable character. And Brandon talks about that.
Yeah, and a lot of that too is also showing like why they are so difficult. Everyone has a story and a reason why they are the way they are. So also showing that is really helpful.
And I think going to the trope list, and when you list a trope down, you could list and say, well, what would cause them to do this or act this sort of way? Or if he's an alpha male, how is he going to react? But then how can I balance him off to be nicer? Or, ooh, that scared me. Or a billionaire, like Michelle wrote in her Christmas billionaire book, was like the epitome of a billionaire, with a guy with money, no clue what's going on in the real world. And being aware of all these tropes that you've been given, where the conflict is there. So now you can say, okay, well, what would cause them to be this? What would they act like? And then how would I help them overcome this thing that they have?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting that you have to be careful with the flaws that you choose, because there are some things you can't redeem people from. Especially in sweet and clean and wholesome romance, there are some darker versions of romance where people try to go those places, but I don't think that it's effective for the majority of us. And that is anybody who treats women badly, anybody who treats any like vulnerable or weak person badly, is not ever going to be something that's redeemable or likable. At the same time, I think that if you do give them flaws and then they grow through the course of the story and improve on those flaws, you have to be really careful not to alter their personality too much. And that's something I see that a lot of writers struggle with, is that if their character grows, they're not necessarily, you don't want to change the way they talk, the way they interact, the way they think, the way they react, to the point where you've completely lost their character. Because that the reason that people like them at the beginning so much of the time has to do with personality. And if they lose their personality while they're losing their flaws, then you're also going to lose your reader. And it's going to not feel like the same person at the end of the book. And so you have to be really careful that you're able to show that growth while at the same time maintaining who they are as a character. So that's always a tricky dance. I do think that some flaws they don't have to grow out of. I think that you can have some minor flaws that they're not going to change from beginning to end of the story. I mean, how often do any of us, change and become perfect? We don't. I mean, there's still going to be flaws in all of us to the end of our days, no matter how much we try to improve. So I think that that's something that you can continue to use through a story, is some of these more minor flaws. And it can be a matter even for humor or for connection in weird ways. Okay, so kind of on the same lines, Andrea wants to know, what do you do when your main male character is not only the love interest, but also the villain? In the case of my story, he is a man with no soul that is sent to take my main female character's life. I think she left out a word, but realizes he cares for her against all odds. So anybody want to address that for Andrea?
Well, I think one of the best examples of something like this is The Beast in Beauty and the Beast, which we all love to do retellings of. And you make them, if you're going to make them a hard exterior, you have to make them vulnerable in another way. And my mind goes to, if you guys saw the, I can't even think of the title of the movie. It's that kids movie where Jack Frost is in it. What is it called? Oh, Guardians.
Rise of the Guardians.
Rise of the Guardians, right? You have Jack Frost is kind of this smarmy kind of kid because he's like, nobody can see me, nobody knows who I am, but he has this backstory of is saving his sister's life. And as soon as you find that out, then everything that he does that's bad, you don't really care about, because you're like, he's this broken, hurt person who is trying to work through this pain. So I think the best way to do is, I'm fine with having your main male character the villain at the start. Obviously, you don't want him to villain all the way to the end, because then that's not really what's happening. But if you want him to be the villain in the beginning, then you need to make him a relatable, something that people can respond to and have because we all want to feel like, oh, I now know how this character feels, and now I can see why they're making these choices. But if you make them like a murderer and a thief and all really bad, just to be bad, nobody can really relate to that. So they're just going to be kind of like, oh, well, this is not the kind of character I would want my main female character falling in love with.
Yeah, the only other thing on that would be if for some reason that isn't going to be the love interest and he's not going to be reformed, then you can still have him be a fascinating character and something that people will even root for and hope that he'll change and he'll let them down. But maybe throughout the story, there will be enough that they can sympathize with that male villain that they can still love him. And one interesting... Go ahead.
I was going to say, Andrea says on here, he needs her soul to survive.
So is it about love or is it about survival? I mean, that's kind of the question, right? So if it's true, the kind of in all of fiction, if it's real love, then it changes you, right? And if it's not real love, if it's just a selfish need, then it's not going to alter you in a fundamental way, right? You're always going to remain that selfish person that's looking after your own needs. And so that's why there's kind of like this dual facet to a villain, is that you could see how they could be a good person if they chose to love and chose, to take care of somebody else, but if they don't, then they stay a villain. And one thing that's really interesting, I always find the character of the Phantom from the Phantom of the Opera to be a really good way to examine this whole duality in a character, because we see, the wrong choices he makes, the bad things he does, the way his obsession drives him. But we also see all the things that tormented him and turned him into what he was. And we see that he truly does have feelings for Christine. And then in the end, he makes the sacrifice to let her go. And so, that's an interesting thing. But he is a villain right up until the very, very end, and he does not get the girl. And so, there's just a lot of things about understanding what you want your character to do and be. But you can, no matter, even if they're the villain, there's a way to make them sympathetic and a way to make them fascinating to the reader.
And I think you have to decide, is this a romance or is this another genre with a love story in it? Because you can end it just like Phantom of the Opera, where he decides in the end to sacrifice himself for her. And then it's not a romance, but it's a love story within that other genre you're writing.
Absolutely. And you can't have book boyfriends in other genres that aren't necessarily the love interest. People fall in love with dark characters all the time. Okay, so how do you make each of your characters unique and fresh? If you're putting out story after story and they all kind of have, similar requirements, how do you keep things new?
For me, I read a personality book a long time ago, and so I try to kind of start there, and is he going to be extroverted or introverted? Is he, just the different kind of character traits that I learned that, and then there's other personality quizzes you can take online. So that's where I start, and then I'll try to do different ones for each one. And then also I start with the female characters as well, and try to find a male main character that will balance her out. That's kind of where I start.
Excellent. I think if you ever start, for me, if I start using the name of somebody from another book, it kind of gives me a clue, did I really make them that different? So I don't know. But yeah, it's totally about making their story goals and their conflicts match the story. And as soon as you do that, you start to create a completely different person. How do you prevent going from romantic to cheesy cornball? Natalie wants to know. So basically, any tips for keeping the male lead realistic but fabulously romantic at the same time?
So to me, cornball means cheesy dialogue. Because actions, I mean, they can do sweet things and that's not as cheesy, but the dialogue can be super cheesy to me. So what I try to do to get away from the cheese is don't be so on the nose with your characters. Don't let them say, I really like you. Have there be a lot of subtext to their conversations and make their conversations more about other things with an underlying tension there. And that's what I think gets rid of the cheese.
I would definitely agree with that. And I would also say stay away from romantic clichés. It's really hard to make, a dozen roses in a, or, those kinds of things romantic really in a book. And I think the best way to avoid clichés is to make everything spontaneous. As soon as your character starts planning something and being really prepared speech and all this planned stuff, then just like in real life, it can get cheesy really quickly. But the spontaneous, almost what's the word I'm looking for? Where they don't want it to happen, stuff that comes out of their mouth. That's the most romantic to me. I know I said that with super.
My most favorite movie that has to do with romantic, almost cheesy cornball stuff, that if you're looking, and it also has to do with Reform Bad Boy, but A Walk to Remember. I mean, all the things he does for her is so cheesy, but it's so sweet. It's just I was like, this is the best movie ever. So if you kind of want to see how it's done and it's done well, I think I would suggest you go watch that movie because he does such amazingly romantic things. And I think if he's doing romantic things that mean something to the female main character, that's really where it's going to be important. If he's just being, bringing her roses, but she doesn't really like roses, but you feel like she has to because that to you is romantic, then I think that's where you go into the cheesy place where you're like, well, everyone's going to expect her to do that. Or you can just watch Isn't It Romantic and just not do anything that Liam Hemsworth's characters does for hers, because that's totally like cheesy. So yeah, anyways.
You're muted, Michelle.
I clicked it. I swear I did. Okay. So Deidre wants to know, how do you get in the male's head? And I think we'll kind of combine it with the next question. Casey, how do you write an authentic male character and keep it clean?
Well, I think for me, when I write male, I was worried about this when I first started writing in the male's perspective, but I haven't ever had anyone come out and tell me that I did it wrong. So I write it like I would the female's head, but he's much more aware of where my female main character is and how she feels, I think. And I think his motivations are different. Obviously, everyone's like, well, in a guy's head, the only motivation is to get her into bed, and it's like, well, when you're writing sweet, that can't be his motivation. But his motivation is what? To get closer to her, to feel the connection with her, and to do those sorts of things. Also, he's more protective, and I always want to make sure that comes across in my male's perspective. He's wanting to keep her safe, or he's wanting to keep her protected, or he's wanting to solve the problems that she has, because we all hate that, where you're like, well, you just listen to me and stop trying to solve my problems, because that's going to be his first thing. She's going to come to him with a problem, he's going to say, how do I fix it? And that can get some good tension going on in the story. But I wouldn't try to not be true to your main male character by making him like a macho man or something that you think, oh, well, a man has to act this way. Make sure that you're being true to the character's voice.
Yeah, I'll add on that. I think it's important to remember we're not writing exact reality. What we're doing is we're writing for an audience, mostly female, who wants to read this fantasy romance about the characters. And so my biggest advice to you to get into the male head is to read a lot of romance where it goes from male to female point of view and see how it's done and mimic that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And then I just try to think about the guys in my life and how they would react to certain situations, and I just kind of I'm a people watcher, and so I just kind of study them, and then I when I'm writing a male character, I like pretend I'm this certain person that I know, and just I like the words come in my head in like a deeper voice, so of course they come out on the screen like guy, so that's just what I do. It makes me think I'm writing like a guy anyway. You're muted again, Michelle.
Keeping it clean, as far as that is concerned, I always try to make sure that I am in control of the scene, and that he's focused on whatever the story problem is, in a way, or whatever the challenge is, or what he wants. And I give my guys other motivations than that. That's not, in some stories, in some genres, desires or passion are the main driving force for a story. But there's more to it in sweet romance. But I think that even if you are, which I do, still show that they are attracted and that they, have that kind of response to a female, you just have to do it subtly with subtext, and with signs that we all recognize as what it is. You don't have to be graphic. You don't have to be saying straight out, that they're checking out her figure or whatever. But you can let us, the reader, know by subtext that sexual tension is there, that he's feeling it, that he's aware of her, that he's attracted to her, that he wants to be with her. But you don't have to be, blunt and brutal. Like, I think it might be in a guy's head sometimes, but remember, you're the filter. And so you can produce the same information in a way that is, like I said, a lot more subtle.
And just reading a lot of clean books, you can see how other authors do it, and that's probably a really good thing to do.
Definitely. Always read. So how do expectations differ between genres, categories, and tropes, and how do you take this into consideration when writing to market?
Well, I think there's a lot in that question. So how do expectations about book boyfriends differ between genres, categories, and tropes?
Yeah, like what readers want the men to be like, based like, so when I put this question together, what I was thinking, in some genres, you really want the man to be really elusive and mysterious and very, very alpha in a lot of ways. And then in a lot of other genres, you want him to be a lot more human or approachable. I mean, there's just different expectations. Like if you're writing Christian romance, for example, your main character is going to be a lot different than if you're writing, like a steamy thriller or something like that.
Well, I think all in all of those, you want a guy with some sort of level of mystery. So and I think the character that you read a book, and the guy who is the most mysterious is probably going to be the love interest of the story, because there's going to be something that the female main character is going to have to unpack, or they're going to have to overcome together. Obviously, in different genres, I mean, your book boyfriends can differ based on the type of tension you have. So, if it's like an urban fantasy and he's the devil and she's, the devil killer, there's going to be some major tension, and there's going to be differences in that story, or in that genre. And I think those types of genres, the more like suspenseful fantasy, sci-fi, there's going to be the love interest is probably going to be more of the alpha, like you said, the alpha male, the one who the guy who needs to be redeemed, is going to be that, maybe different than the Christian romance, where it's going to be the one who's misunderstood or has this painful past that he has to move on from. So I think you just need to take into consideration the level of tension and the level of mystery in your book, and then vary accordingly.
And I hate to sound like a broken record, but really, if you're going to be writing in a certain genre, you need to know what the reader expectations are, and you find that out by reading the popular books that are in that genre. So if you're writing in the billionaire trope, then read the top billionaire books that are selling super well and figure out what the main male character has in those books that you should be mimicking in your book.
Yeah, I would say if I was to pick up like an urban fantasy and the main male character, and it was really emotional and open and immediately accessible and all those sorts of things, then it would not work at all for that genre. Okay. Laura wants to know, how do you go about marketing your awesome book boyfriends once you create them? So, Amy, you've taught a lot of people about what kind of images to use for Facebook ads. You want to touch on that at all?
Well, I think with anything you're going to market, you don't really want to market on the head, the nail on the head. People are like, well, do I need to get a person that looks like my main character? And yeah, maybe you could. I mean, I always say test, but I want to portray a feeling about what's going on in the story. So if it's like, let's say, Christian romance with people on a farm, right? Or on a ranch, then I would want to have like, a cowboy and a girl, and they have, softer features, and they're more affectionate towards one another. Whereas if it's kind of like a more edgy urban fantasy, you kind of want to show that tension, that does she like him? Does she not? Is she stepping away from him? All of those things. Body language is so amazing when it comes to images. And when I'm scrolling and I'm looking for images to market with, if a picture catches my eye, I stop and I go, well, why did this catch my eye? And what kind of feeling am I getting just by looking at a picture? You get feelings by listening to music. So, and those are the feelings that you want to portray in your book. So if you can mimic that feeling and then bring them to your product page, then that will help them convert better. Now, how do you market your awesome book boyfriend? honestly just make sure your book's on point, your blurb's on point, and then the writing will do what it will. I mean, Victorine says it's the writing that keeps people reading, and it's the writing that keeps people going on to your next series. So if you create book boyfriends that people absolutely love, then they're going to continue moving on because they know they're going to get a hero that they want to fall in love with.
So the only other point I think I would make is on covers. There are certain tropes that lend themselves better to having covers with males on them. For example, writing billionaire romances or cowboy romances, or any kind of rock star or bodyguard. Any of those kinds of tropes lend themselves to having a male on the cover. And if you're doing something more along the lines of fake marriage, or something that is more woman-centric, then, that wouldn't necessarily be the right direction for you to go. You wouldn't want to do something with like bride or fake marriage or something like that as a trope with the title and then have a man on there. So I think that is just part of your marketing. So when you
and
choose...
Victorine always says, what do you always say, Victorine, about smiling people on covers?
I don't like smiling people on covers because it implies to me that there's no tension in the book. And so I like my couples to have this, implied tension between them.
The cover's about the beginning, not the happily ever after, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so last question, or two questions, and this is just for fun for us. What is the favorite male lead from a book that you've written? Your favorite?
I'll go. So I like all of them, of course, because that's why I wrote them. But I think I really liked Noah in It Was Always You, because he he was the bad guy in Meet Me There. Like he was like you didn't like him. But then in It Was Always You, you saw why he was the way he was, and he's just, I don't know, I just love him. He's so sweet. But he's like this bad boy, and with a hidden story that he doesn't want anyone to know. So yeah, that's why I liked him. And he's just funny and flirty, and he just does what he wants. So I like him.
I think I like the bad boys too. My favorite one's probably Thaddeus from my Beauty and the Beast retelling, which is Falling for the Beast, because he's kind of this bad boy character, kind of rough around the edges, but you learn why, and you learn to really like him. So I agree with that.
I would say mine is Reed from Marrying the Billionaire, because he's just so romantic and sweet and nice, and he's got lots of money, and he just loves the main character girl. And I mean, the tension or the plot point that kept them apart was the fact that she was pregnant. She didn't want him to know. So I got to make him just be like the epitome of guy that you would want to date and meet. It's just, I don't know. He was my favorite one to write.
So I think that, funny enough, I would have to go with Lee Franklin from my first YA series that you meet in my book, Candid. And it's kind of interesting because I've written a lot of really good males since then, but there was just something about his character that I really enjoyed writing. And I knew him better, I think, than a lot of my other male characters. So that is not one of my to-market books necessarily. It's not one that sells a lot. It's got good reviews, and I have a lot of people that have read that book and feel the same way as I do about Lee. So yeah, he probably will always be one of my favorites, and right now he is. And then in my young adult book that I'm currently working on, Flirting with the Bad Boy, it's interesting because those bad boys tend to like really earn a place in your heart, don't they? And I'm still trying to figure him out, and I'm having to kind of like wrestle him into submission right now because he's trying to have a potty mouth on me, and he is proving elusive and mysterious to me, and so that's getting interesting. So who is your favorite book boyfriend from someone else's book, like just from your personal reading? So Go ahead, Judy.
I really liked Mr. Rochester in Jane Eyre. I just thought he was funny. And, you know.
He was funny. He had some great lines.
Yeah.
There might be some people who'd want to kill me if I didn't say Mr. Darcy, but it's not Mr. Darcy. So I have about 7 Georgette Hare heroes that are my absolute favorite. Sir Waldo from the Nonsuch. And oh my gosh, see if I started naming them all, it would just be bad. And Beauvalet from Beauvalet. Okay, you just have to read that one too. Okay, but I'm also going to mention a couple others. There's a book called The Scourge, and the main guy in it is called, I don't know how you even say his name. I always called it Perry in my mind, but it's spelled Peree. He shoots bows. I mean, he shoots with a bow and arrow, and that's like hands down my favorite thing. Kind of like with Legolas from the Lord of the Rings and Robin Hood. Oh my gosh. If you can shoot a bow, I'm your slave. So anyways, there's that. And then I really like Sicarius, who is an assassin from Lindsay Buroker's Emperor's Edge series. And he is an interesting character from beginning to end, and not what you would expect a love interest to be, but he totally was. So there you go.
I totally go ahead. I'm like, I just remembered some, so I'll get them later.
Well, my favorite book ever, I think, is probably Cinder and Ella by Kelly Oram. And so the main character there is an actor, and he's kind of cocky, but you just fall in love with him. So his name is Brian Oliver in the book. So that's my book boyfriend.
I would say one of mine that I love to read was Scarlet from the Marissa Meyer series of Cinder and stuff. The guy that plays her, he's like the broken, bad boy type. The only thing I did not like was that the fact that she said he had pointy teeth. Like all his teeth were filed to points, and I was just like, okay, now he just got not so attractive anymore. But if you just forgot that little detail, he just like that whole book, like he's just like, oh, he's my favorite. He was pretty yummy.
I liked him too. I also liked Thorne. I think he was in Cress, the third book. He was just funny and like a bad guy. But I remembered like my absolute favorite ones. I don't know why I didn't say him first. But Warner from the Shattered Me series, I love him so much because he's a bad guy, but you love him. And then also Will from the Infernal Devices series by Cassandra Clare. I love him too. So read those books. They're amazing.
Yes. Okay. So I think we could talk about book boyfriends all night long. But do we have any questions on the YouTube feed?
We had one from, let's see. Nope, we had 2. Let's see. Andrea asked, if my books are paranormal romance, what would the audience expect in a man?
Yeah, I think we talked about that a lot already, as far as like in those genres where there is usually a villain and there's usually some kind of danger, then you want your guy to be strong. You want him to be protective, and you do want him to have a little bit of prickliness about him, to where he's not just super cuddly teddy bear. And there's always that challenge in them coming together. And you also want him to be more of an alpha, decisive, kind of person.
And most of the paranormal romance is the girl getting swept into this normal girl getting swept into this paranormal type world where the guy is a regular person resident of that world already. I don't think the trope goes the opposite way as well, where it's the guy that gets swept up into the girl and that's just not as common, I would say. So I would be careful. I mean, obviously you can always take a trope and twist it on its head. But just gotta be careful, especially if you're not an established author. And if you're going to go against the norm of tropes, then I would watch how you're doing that and just be like, is it a for love book or for a money book? So
yeah, I think it's definitely we're a warrior trope too, like just that they're a warrior. of some kind. Yeah.
All right. So our next question, Diana asks, what do you expect in a man in a crime mystery fiction?
So from all of the crime and mystery things that I've read, they need to be somebody who is sharp and observant, and they need to be almost an unexpected hero in a way. Does that make sense? Like, so most of the ones I've read, like, the guy is not necessarily there to solve crimes. He gets pulled into it by, circumstances, usually by, love. I mean, maybe if he's a detective, he is, but maybe he's got unknown qualities or strengths that come out as he's challenged through the story. So unlike in paranormal romances or fantasy romances where the guy kind of starts out as a really strong warrior, I think that the guy is tested, and I think that he is going to have to grow throughout the book. That's just some thoughts that I have. I don't know if anybody else has any more.
For me, I guess when you first read that question, I thought that they would kind of maybe be a little less of an emotional guy, a little maybe, he notices all these crime things, but maybe aloof in his love life and doesn't really notice like those kinds of things. A little distant, take some time to realize romantic stuff. That's what came to my mind.
They're usually pretty broken too. They usually come, already broken inside and flawed, and don't necessarily even get over it through the course of the book all the time. So, anyways, is that all we got?
That's all we got.
Well, guys, thanks for being here. Thanks for watching our podcast live if you're here, and we love to hear from you. If you don't watch us live, we hope that you will subscribe, and then every week when we go live, you'll get a notification, and then you can start joining in on the interaction we have going on. But hope you will like, follow, and join our Facebook group, and we will talk to you next week.